The clock on her dashboard read 11:45 p.m. as Ashley drove home from the library, her mind still buzzing with legal terms from her pre-law study session. The streets of Georgetown were quiet, with only the occasional car passing by. She'd stayed later than usual, determined to master the material for her upcoming exam. Red and blue lights suddenly flashed in her rearview mirror. Ashley checked her speed. She was going exactly at the limit. With a sigh, she pulled over, remembering everything her dad, a veteran FBI agent, had taught her about traffic stops. Keep your hands visible on the steering wheel. Stay calm. Be respectful, but know your rights. Officer Barrett approached her window, his flashlight beam almost blinding. Ashley maintained her composure despite her racing heart. License and registration, he demanded, without the usual greeting most officers offered. Of course, officer. My registration is in the glove compartment. I'm going to reach for it now, okay? The officer didn't respond, just kept his light trained on her. Ashley moved slowly, deliberately, retrieving her documents with steady hands. She'd done nothing wrong. This would be over soon. You know why I pulled you over? Barrett's tone was harsh, accusatory. No, sir, I don't. I was following the speed limit and all traffic laws. Barrett scoffed. This is a nice car for a young person. Where'd you get it? It's my car, officer. A graduation gift from my parents. Ashley kept her voice level, though frustration bubbled beneath the surface. Step out of the vehicle. May I ask why, officer? I haven't done anything wrong. I said step out. His voice rose sharply, hand moving to his belt. Ashley's heart pounded, but she complied, moving slowly and keeping her hands visible. The cold night air hit her face as she stepped onto the street. Turn around, hands behind your back. Officer, please, I'm a Georgetown student. I was just heading home from the library. You can check my student ID. Resisting arrest. Barrett grabbed her arm roughly, spinning her around. I'm not resisting. Please, let me call my father. He's an FBI agent. Yeah, right, Barrett laughed coldly. And I'm the president. You're under arrest for resisting an officer and suspected vehicle theft. The handcuffs clicked shut around Ashley's wrists, cold metal biting into her skin. She struggled to maintain composure as Barrett pushed her toward his patrol car, ignoring her requests to call her father. Through her fear, Ashley remembered to note every detail. The time, the officer's badge number glinting under the streetlight, the passing cars whose drivers slowed to watch. Her father had always stressed the importance of mental documentation in situations like this, though she'd never imagined she'd need those lessons. As Barrett roughly guided her into the back of his patrol car, Ashley caught a glimpse of her reflection in the window. The straight-A student, the girl who'd never even had a parking ticket, now sat handcuffed like a criminal. Tears threatened to fall, but she held them back. She knew her father would move heaven and earth to right this wrong, but right now, she had to stay strong and alert. The patrol car pulled away from her vehicle, which now sat abandoned by the curb. Ashley watched her car disappear into the distance, along with any sense of security she'd once felt in her own neighborhood. This was supposed to be a normal Tuesday night. How had it turned into this nightmare? As they drove toward the precinct, Ashley silently recited the details of her constitutional rights, just as her father had taught her. She knew this wasn't the end of the story. What Officer Barrett didn't realize was that he just made the biggest mistake of his career, and justice would soon follow. The phone's sharp ring cut through the quiet house at 2:17 a.m. Robert Thompson's eyes snapped open, 20 years of FBI training kicking in instantly. Late-night calls never brought good news. Dad. His daughter's voice trembled on the other end. I'm at the police station. They arrested me. Robert was already pulling on his clothes, phone pressed to his ear. Are you hurt? His voice remained steady despite the storm brewing inside him. No, but Dad, this officer, he wouldn't listen. He said I stole my own car. His body camera was off, and Ashley's voice cracked. I'm on my way. Remember what I taught you. Don't say anything else without a lawyer present. Robert grabbed his FBI credentials and car keys. I'll be there in 15 minutes. The drive to the precinct felt endless. Robert's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, his mind racing through protocols and procedures. This wasn't just about his daughter anymore. This was about abuse of power, about everything he fought against during his career. He pulled out his phone at a red light, dialing his old partner. "Hey, Mike, I need a favor. Can you check the security cameras near Georgetown Library? Looking for footage from about midnight. My daughter." By the time Robert reached the precinct, 3 local business owners had already sent him security footage of the traffic stop. His colleague in the tech division was running the officer's name through federal databases. Robert had built a network of honest people over his career. Now it was time to use it. The desk sergeant's eyes widened as Robert displayed his FBI credentials. "I'm here for Ashley Thompson." "Sir, visiting house." "This isn't a visit. My daughter was wrongfully arrested, and I want to see the arresting officer's body camera footage right now." The sergeant shifted uncomfortably. "Officer Barrett's camera malfunctioned during the stop." Malfunctioned? Robert's tone was ice cold. "Just like it malfunctioned last month during the Wilson arrest? And the Chen traffic stop before that?" The sergeant's surprise was visible. Robert had done his homework during the drive-over. 15 minutes was plenty of time for an FBI supervisor to start connecting dots. "I want to see my daughter. Now." As they walked through the station, Robert noticed officers averting their eyes. Some knew him from joint operations, knew his reputation for cracking difficult cases. Others simply sensed the quiet authority he carried. Ashley sat in an interview room, still handcuffed to the table. When she saw her father, tears finally spilled down her cheeks. "Take those off," Robert ordered, pointing to the handcuffs. "Unless you want to explain to a federal judge why you're detaining an innocent student without probable cause." The cuffs came off quickly. Robert hugged his daughter tight, whispering, "I'm here now. You're safe." But as he held her, his mind was already working. The security footage would show everything. Officer Barrett's record would reveal patterns. Every officer who'd covered for him would be exposed. This wasn't just about one wrongful arrest anymore. This was about cleaning up a system that had protected bad officers for too long. Robert Thompson hadn't become an FBI supervisor by backing down from tough cases. As he led Ashley out of the station, Robert caught Officer Barrett watching from across the room. The officer's smug expression faltered as Robert met his gaze. "Let's go home," Robert told his daughter. But they both knew this was just the beginning. Justice would come, not through anger or revenge, but through the patient, methodical dismantling of corruption that Robert had perfected over his career. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. The wall of Robert's home office became a web of connections. Photos, reports, and sticky notes covered every inch, linked by colored strings. 3 weeks had passed since Ashley's arrest, and each day revealed more disturbing patterns in Officer Barrett's history. "Look at this," Robert pointed to a stack of complaints his contact in internal affairs had quietly shared. 12 similar incidents in the past year alone. All minorities, all dismissed without investigation. His daughter sat nearby, typing on her laptop. The incident had changed her, not broken her, but transformed her determination into something stronger. "I've found 3 more victims willing to speak out," she said. "A med student, a business owner, and a high school teacher." Robert nodded, adding new notes to the wall. The investigation had become their shared mission, bringing them closer even as it exposed ugly truths about the system they trusted. His phone buzzed, a text from Officer Chen, one of the good cops who'd reached out after hearing about Ashley's arrest. "Another video just disappeared from the evidence room, but I backed it up first." The corruption ran deeper than just Barrett. The precinct captain had buried complaints. Evidence went missing. Witness statements were altered. But Robert hadn't spent 20 years in the FBI without learning how to crack tough cases. He'd started small, building trust with officers who were tired of the corruption. Each conversation led to another contact, another piece of evidence. Like putting together a puzzle where someone had tried to burn the pieces. "Dad, look at this pattern." Ashley called him over to her laptop. She'd created a map showing Barrett's traffic stops. Red dots clustered in minority neighborhoods, forming a clear picture of targeted harassment. "Good work." Robert squeezed her shoulder. She'd been instrumental in the investigation, her legal training helping to organize the evidence into a compelling narrative. His phone rang, the U.S. Attorney's office. "Thompson here," he answered, putting it on speaker. "We've reviewed your preliminary findings. the federal prosecutor said. This goes beyond individual misconduct. We're looking at a potential RICO case. Robert exchanged looks with Ashley. RICO charges were serious, designed to tackle organized corruption. It meant they could go after everyone involved in the cover-up. After the call, Robert stared at their evidence wall. Photos of Barrett's victims looked back at him, each face representing a life impacted by unchecked prejudice. But among them were also photos of allies, honest officers who'd risked their careers to share evidence, community leaders who'd helped gather testimonies, legal experts who'd offered guidance. What happens next? Ashley asked, standing beside him. We build the case stronger, Robert replied. Every detail matters. Barrett and his friends think they're untouchable because they've gotten away with this for years. But they've never faced a federal investigation before. His computer pinged, another email from a whistleblower within the department. More evidence of deleted body camera footage, more covered-up complaints. But this time, they had backups of everything. They're getting nervous, Ashley observed, noting how more officers were coming forward. Word's spreading about the investigation. Robert nodded. Fear makes people sloppy. They'll start making mistakes. As if on cue, his phone lit up with a message from his surveillance team. Barrett had just been caught tampering with evidence in the precinct's basement. They had him on camera. Got you, Robert whispered, adding another red string to their evidence wall. The web of corruption was becoming clearer every day, and soon it would be time to start bringing it down. Ashley brought them both coffee, a nightly ritual since they'd started the investigation. You know, she said, this isn't just about what happened to me anymore. It never was, Robert replied. It's about making sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. Together, they turned back to their work. The night was still young, and justice was getting closer with each piece of evidence they uncovered. The community center buzzed with nervous energy as people filed in. Ashley stood at the door, greeting each arrival with a warm smile. Some came clutching documents, others with just their stories, but all shared the same look in their eyes. A mix of hope and hesitation. Thank you for coming, she said to a young doctor who'd been stopped 3 times in 1 month. You're not alone anymore. Robert watched from the back of the room, pride mixing with sadness as his daughter transformed their private fight into a community movement. The turnout was bigger than they'd expected, 30 people, each with their own story about Officer Barrett and his colleagues. A local civil rights attorney they'd partnered with, Lisa Chen, set up a recording station in one corner. Each testimony strengthens our case, she explained. Your stories matter. An elderly man raised his hand during the sharing session. My grandson was arrested last year. Same officer, same lies about resisting arrest. We couldn't fight it. Who'd believe our word against the cops? We believe you, Ashley said firmly. And more importantly, we have evidence. Robert stepped forward, sharing their findings without compromising the ongoing investigation. Security footage showing patterns of harassment, documentation of tampered evidence, internal communications revealing coordinated cover-ups. But we need your help, he explained. Your stories complete the picture. Show the human cost of these actions. A woman stood up, hands shaking slightly. I lost my job after he arrested me. Missed 3 days of work because they wouldn't let me make a phone call. By the time I got out, my position had been filled. Others joined in, each story building on the last. A college student who missed his finals. A nurse whose medical license was threatened. A teacher who now had panic attacks during traffic stops. Officer Chen, who'd been helping their investigation, arrived in civilian clothes. I've seen it from the inside, he shared. Good cops want these bad actors gone too. They poison everything we're supposed to stand for. As the meeting continued, Ashley noticed people exchanging phone numbers, offering support and resources to each other. What started as a collection of isolated incidents was becoming a united front. Robert's phone buzzed. Another officer wanted to come forward with evidence. The wall of silence was cracking. Barrett's supporters were losing ground as more colleagues chose the right side of history. We're filing a class action lawsuit, Lisa announced. But this is bigger than just legal action. We're building a movement for accountability. A young mother raised her hand. What about retaliation? Barrett's friends are still out there. That's why we're stronger together, Ashley explained. They can't intimidate all of us. and my father's FBI team is watching for any signs of harassment. The meeting ran late into the evening. People lingered, sharing resources and stories. Some cried, finally feeling heard. Others stood straighter, anger transforming into determination. This is how change happens, Robert told his daughter as they packed up. Not just in courtrooms, but in communities coming together. Ashley nodded, looking at the stack of signed testimonies. Barrett thought he could get away with it because people were scared and alone. But not anymore. As they left, more messages poured in from others wanting to share their stories. The movement was growing. Justice wasn't just a federal investigation now, it was becoming a collective demand for change that couldn't be ignored. The first brick came through Dr. Wilson's window at midnight. The young doctor had just finished testifying about his encounters with Officer Barrett. Inside the brick was a note, "Keep your mouth shut." They didn't know Robert had installed security cameras at every witness's home. Within hours, he had clear footage of 2 off-duty officers from Barrett's precinct. More evidence for the growing case file. They're scared, Ashley told the growing group of supporters during their weekly meeting. These intimidation tactics show we're getting closer to the truth. The resistance grew more organized. Mysterious traffic stops of key witnesses. Cases suddenly lost in the system. One morning, Ashley found her car tires slashed in the university parking lot. But for every act of intimidation, their support grew stronger. Local shop owners installed extra security cameras. Off-duty security guards volunteered to protect witnesses. A retired judge offered his office as a safe meeting space. Got another one, Officer Chen texted Robert late one night. Barrett's dash cam footage from last week. He accidentally turned it off again, but the backup system caught everything. Robert added it to their growing evidence wall. The pattern was clear. Barrett and his supporters were getting sloppy, leaving more traces as they tried to cover their tracks. A young intern from the evidence room reached out secretly. "They're shredding files," she whispered during a midnight meeting in a quiet diner. "But I've been making copies. Everything they destroy, I save." The intimidation reached its peak when someone broke into Robert's office at the FBI. They found nothing. He'd seen it coming, kept all sensitive files in secure locations, but it proved how desperate Barrett's allies had become. "Your daughter should watch her back," an anonymous caller told Robert one morning. They didn't know the call was already being traced, every word recorded. Ashley refused to back down. "If they want to scare us, they'll have to do better than cheap threats," she said, helping organize another community meeting. The crowd had grown to over 100 people now. Local media started paying attention, not to the threats, but to the story of a community standing up against corruption. Each attempted intimidation brought more supporters to their cause. "Remember," Robert told his growing team of investigators, "document everything. Every threat, every missing file, every accident. It's all evidence of consciousness of guilt." The police union tried to pressure Officer Chen to stay quiet. Instead, he brought forward 5 more officers ready to testify. "We're tired of carrying their secrets," he said. Late one night, as Robert and Ashley reviewed security footage, she asked, "Do you think they'll ever stop?" "They'll stop," he replied, adding another photo to their evidence wall, "when they realize they're only making our case stronger." Even the district attorney's office, usually hesitant to challenge police, couldn't ignore the mounting evidence. Especially after Barrett's supporters tried to break into the DA's computer system, leaving digital fingerprints everywhere. The intimidation tactics had backfired. Instead of silencing witnesses, they'd created an army of supporters. Every threat documented, every act of retaliation adding another charge to the growing federal case. "They thought they could scare us into silence," Ashley told their latest community meeting. Instead, they showed everyone exactly why this fight matters. The resistance had revealed the true extent of the corruption. But more importantly, it had shown the strength of a community united for justice. Each attempt to stop them only made their case stronger, their resolve deeper, and their support broader. The federal courthouse buzzed with tension. Every seat was filled, with people lining the walls. Ashley sat in the front row, watching Officer Barrett shift uncomfortably at the defense table. "Call your first witness," the judge announced. Ashley walked to the stand, her steps steady despite her racing heart. She'd practiced her testimony for weeks, but facing Barrett directly made her mouth go dry. "Please tell us about the night of your arrest," the prosecutor began. Ashley's voice grew stronger as she described every detail. The unnecessary stop, the escalating aggression, the handcuffs cutting into her wrists. In the gallery, several jurors took notes, their expressions darkening. "He never asked for my registration," she concluded, "never ran my plates, just assumed the car was stolen because—" "Because what?" the prosecutor pressed. "Because of how I look," Ashley said firmly, meeting Barrett's gaze. Barrett's lawyer tried to shake her testimony. "Isn't it true you were argumentative?" "No," Ashley replied calmly. "The dash cam footage from the nearby convenience store shows everything. Would you like to play it?" The security footage rolled on the courtroom screens. Crystal clear images showed Ashley's calm compliance, Barrett's aggressive behavior. The lawyer sat down quickly. Robert took the stand next, his FBI badge gleaming. "We discovered a pattern," he explained, as evidence photos appeared on screens. Officer Barrett conducted 247 traffic stops in 6 months. 89% targeted minority drivers. His body camera mysteriously malfunctioned during 73 of these stops. The evidence mounted, financial records showing unexplained deposits in Barrett's account. Text messages revealing coordination with other officers to cover up complaints. Missing evidence logs that a brave intern had secretly copied. Then came the parade of witnesses. The doctor whose medical bag was mistaken for contraband. The teacher pulled over 3 times in 1 week. The business owner whose security cameras caught Barrett planting evidence. Officer Chen testified about the department's unwritten rules. "We were told to delete footage that could cause problems," he revealed. Ordered to change reports to match Barrett's version of events. During a break, Ashley overheard 2 jurors whispering. "How long has this been going on?" one asked. "Right under our noses." Barrett's defense crumbled as more officers took deals to testify. They described weekly meetings where problematic officers coordinated their stories. A retired sergeant admitted to destroying complaints that could have stopped Barrett years ago. The final blow came from Barrett's own partner. "I can't keep quiet anymore," he testified, avoiding Barrett's betrayed glare. "We were taught to profile, taught which neighborhoods to target, taught how to make stops look legitimate." As closing arguments approached, Ashley watched Barrett's confident smirk fade. He'd expected the blue wall of silence to protect him. Instead, it had cracked open, exposing years of systematic abuse. The prosecutor's closing was simple. She just played the security footage from Ashley's arrest, followed by similar footage from dozen other stops. The pattern was undeniable. "This isn't about one bad officer," she concluded. "This is about a system that protected him, enabled him, and looked the other way, until now." In the gallery, Ashley squeezed her father's hand. Whatever the verdict, they'd exposed the truth. The city would never be the same. As the jury filed out, Ashley noticed young officers in the audience. They'd been watching the trial, learning what real justice looked like. Change was already beginning. The jury took just 4 hours to reach their verdict. As everyone filed back into the courtroom, Ashley noticed how Barrett's shoulders slumped, his former arrogance replaced by resignation. Guilty on all counts. The words echoed through the packed courtroom. Guilty of civil rights violations. Guilty of evidence tampering. Guilty of conspiracy. Guilty of obstruction of justice. Barrett wasn't alone. 5 other officers and 2 supervisors faced charges. The police chief resigned in disgrace. The corrupt system they'd built was crumbling. 3 months later, Ashley stood at a podium outside the new Police Accountability Office. "This building represents more than justice for one case," she told the crowd. "It's a promise to our community that no badge will ever be a license for prejudice." The changes came quickly. Body cameras that couldn't be turned off. Civilian oversight boards with real power. Required bias training led by community members who'd experienced profiling firsthand. Robert headed the new FBI task force on law enforcement accountability. His office walls now held thank you letters instead of evidence photos. Each letter represented someone who'd found the courage to speak up because of their case. "Your dad's a hero," a young rookie told Ashley after a community training session. "He's teaching us what real police work should look like." The old guard resisted at first, but as arrest numbers dropped while solve rates rose, even skeptics had to admit, fair policing worked better than prejudice. Dr. Wilson reopened his practice, no longer afraid of late-night emergency calls. The teacher who'd testified now led workshops for officers on community relations. Officer Chen became a sergeant, mentoring younger officers in ethical policing. Ashley's law school graduation felt like a victory celebration. Her class project on police accountability had become a blueprint for departments nationwide. As she accepted her diploma, she spotted familiar faces in the crowd, witnesses who'd become friends, officers who'd chosen truth over silence. "Remember when you asked if things would ever change?" Robert said at the celebration dinner. "Look around." The restaurant was filled with people from their journey. The intern who'd saved evidence was now a department supervisor. The judge who'd provided safe meeting space was implementing reforms across the district. Barrett's sentencing made headlines, but the real story was the change that followed. Other departments started proactive investigations. Officers came forward about misconduct, knowing they'd be protected. Communities began trusting police again, one interaction at a time. 1 year later, Ashley took a job with the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division. Her first case involved a different city, different officers, but the same issues. This time, though, she had a roadmap for change. "Your arrest was terrible," a young woman told her after a community meeting. "But look at all the good that came from it. You showed us how to fight back the right way." Robert's FBI task force expanded nationwide. He traveled the country, teaching departments how to root out corruption before it took hold. His team's motto became simple: protect and serve means everyone. The final proof came in the numbers. Traffic stops down 60%, civilian complaints down 80%, solve rates up 45%, community trust building daily. During their weekly dinner, Ashley showed her father a letter. Another department wanted to implement their reforms. "Think we should help them?" Robert smiled. "That's what this was always about. Not just catching one bad officer, but changing the whole system." Outside, new recruits trained under Officer Chen's watchful eye. Their badges gleamed in the sunlight, symbols not of power, but of responsibility. Real change had come, one honest officer at a time.